Welcome to Toffee TV. I'm joined by John Blaine. We are going to be discussing the ESSG. It came out earlier this week that Everton Stakeholder Supporters Group, I think that's what it is, will meet with Everton CEO Denise Barrett-Baxendale and other staff members to discuss proposals put in place to put a fan on the board. Now, Patreon subscribers will know that this is something me and John did discuss probably 2 weeks ago now. We had a big overview of how things were at Everton and what John thought, could make a difference. This was mentioned, as was a shadow board and things like that. This has come out. Let me just stress, by the way, this has been going on for 6 months. This isn't a result of Everton or any protests or not doing well or just because John said it needed to happen, they've done it a week later. This has been in place for a while. But John, the news was in the press yesterday, the time of recording, so about the ESSG official announcement and all of that. And basically the three principles or the three fundamental things that came out of it were a fan would be appointed or approved, the fan director, as it was mentioned certainly by people like the Echo.
Sorry, go on. I know I'm cutting you out, mate, but right early on, it's not about approving or selecting a fan director, it's about electing one.
Electing, yeah. All right.
Really,
that is important. No, you're right, that is important.
Okay, go ahead.
But it is in the three things I was going to say. So you've done there is you've done a little bit of a Benteke on Coleman there on Sunday. You've dived in, stood showing, and you've got away with it because I'll let you off. So the three things were that fan director who is elected will be a full member of the board who attends board meetings, doesn't have restrictions, and has equal voting rights. Secondly, they are directly accountable to and will be elected by Evertonians or Everton supporters. It won't be someone just picked, it'll be elected through a voting system, I imagine. And they will be suitably qualified, possess experience and the competencies necessary to effectively operate at that board level. This is quite clearly what you were talking about a couple of weeks ago. So what have you made of the fact that this is now out in the public domain, so to speak? And are you on board with it, so to speak?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's always a couple of things, isn't there? One is you're drinking tea and I've got a nice pale ale, so let's cheers. Yeah.
Hey, cheers, yeah. That sums us up really, a tea drinker versus someone who can take the ale. But fair play.
Mate, I've just had a really crap 2 or 3 days. And thought, shall I make myself a cup of tea or shall I get beer out of my beer fridge? So I got a beer out of my beer fridge.
Always.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important. It's goodness, actually, that for the people who are watching, that what you just said the fan director will do, you read straight out of the executive summary that was issued by the SSG, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things here. If we step back a moment and say, what have the SSG done? They've fundamentally spent maybe 5-6 months, whatever it is, speaking amongst themselves, speaking with the wider fan base, with opportunities. It's quite clear with some of the social media response that not everyone actually noticed that this was going on, and therefore there are people out there who have not contributed, right? And some untruths or misunderstandings have arisen as well. So I think the SSG needs to, step up and be bold. And I don't think they're hiding. I just think they think the document stands up in its own right, which I think it does. So people need to read it. For people who don't like reading, I mean, I've got it in front of me. I guess you have as well. But it's not that big,
Yeah.
Was it maybe 10 pages? But the exec summary itself is a page and a half, and that's all people really need to read. I think they can understand all the background to it by reading more, but fundamentally, what the SSG have spent the time doing is producing a proposal, which is the document which is in the public domain. Earlier this week, they sent it, I believe, to the football club last week, but then they had a meeting with the club this week. Okay. And let's be bold. Let's not be shy here. It's not just the club. They met with the chief executive. Okay. Yeah. And so they met with the chief executive and fundamentally said, here are our proposals about fan representation that is effective. And they only have 2 proposals. really. Dead simple. One, they want a fan on the board.
Yeah.
Well, we all want that, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And they want that fan on the board to be a member of and supported by a fan advisory board, which is the shadow board type thing that me and you talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine fans don't like that either. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you get into the problems about all the thousands of questions that people, well, how do you get on this fans board? Is it all bloody jobs for the boys? You know, all those sorts of things. Mm. And so perhaps the third thing to say is all these people, whoever they turn out to be, will be fully elected through a transparent, open and transparent election that is, open to all, if you will.
Yeah.
As long as you're an Evertonian, of course. Yeah. Therefore, they're fundamentally what the SSG is proposing is that the Everton fan base elect 11 of their own to be a shadow board or or a fan advisory board. The name doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
And that one of them, or at least one of them, will also attend board meetings at the football club, and that board meeting stuff at the football club would be as an equal to the other board members at the club. Nice. So your question was really, and are you up for this or you're supportive of it? Damn right I am,
Yeah.
Having a fully elected shadow board for Everton Football Club, where at least one of them actually attends Everton Football Club board meetings, that's fan representation done large, isn't it?
Yeah,
really,
definitely. Yeah.
It's not something our partners our brothers and sisters from across the park have achieved yet. I mean, what the Spirit of Shankly announced a number of weeks ago, I guess, is the equivalent of the fan advisory board. Yeah. And I think the SSG have gone the extra yard, if you like, and said, no, we want at least one of these to be on the Everton board as well. Yeah, And the chief exec was very receptive to both proposals in the meeting.
Well, I mean, that's good. What do we say to people who still will accept this news, receive this news with the nod, the no and I of, oh yeah, it's just a pat on the head. It's kind of done for show and all of this, because this is born, am I right in saying, John, that this came about because of the Super League, really? And obviously there's been a lot of discontent, I think, from football supporters, certainly over the last couple of years. COVID really, I think, made people step away from the game because you couldn't go and looked at everything. Right, You looked at everything and people were like, oh, this is a bit rubbish the way they treat us. And then when we actually saw the impact on the football club of us not being there physically, we kind of started going, oh, they actually need us, because without us, the game's crap. The game is empty. As we saw, we've all watched a year of football with no fans, and it was pathetic, really, wasn't it? It was just weird football. So I think fans then started going, we are actually more important than we've been led to believe by TV and by the club and stuff. And then obviously Tracy Crouch got involved, and there was things like that because of the Super League. So has this been born out of that? Is that right?
I think at the very beginning, the short answer would be yes. I mean, it was from the fan-led review. Yeah. I think Denise Barrett-Baxendale, as chief executive, asked the fans forum to sort of come up with, speak to the fans and see what contribution you want to make to the fan-led review from the football club's perspective. Clearly the football club put out surveys. What the fans forum did is went back to the club and said, yeah, we'll do this, but we're going to drag in a load of other fan groups, if you want to call them that. Okay. I mean, that's some of the social media commenters, the single individual who's not a member of anything saying, no one asked me, so you can't capture everybody.
But they are covered by groups, aren't they?
I think it's one of those things where perhaps, it's always going to pass them by, because at the end of the day, this has all been done digitally, So bless him, if my dad was around and he was 80 odd, and he would be 80 odd, chasing 90 by now, he wouldn't have known about this unless I told him. So inevitably, you're going to miss segments of the fan base.
Yeah,
but I mean, if you look what the SSG was, it's the disabled supporters, it's the fans forum, it's the shareholders association, It's the supporters committee, which is predominantly people who go to away games all the time, isn't it? It's the Heritage Society. There's 3 overseas people on it, one from North America, one from Europe, one from Asia Pac. And then, of course, there's a catch-all, which is actually Dave Kelly, and people should know who Dave is. And Dave's not a yes man for the football club in any way, shape or form. And he was capturing all those organisations who are affiliated to the Football Supporters Association. And Dave has fronted it up for them. And that's Rainbow Toffees and so on. Yeah. So I think, this entity, whilst it might not have covered everybody, and it needs to going forward, and they know that, and they'll embrace, we're now at a place called Start, to use one of my favoured sound bites. I think it's credible. I'm a group. I've got it in front of me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Quite far-reaching, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of groups. I didn't hear how many you froze, John, just when you were telling me how many it was altogether.
Yeah, it's okay. There's 9.
9, okay, so 9 with who are covering different areas and stuff.
If you count the international reps as individuals, there's 9 of them.
Yeah, who represent others, of course. So, I suppose people will always complain. If no one knocked on my door and asked me and all of that stuff, but
we shouldn't look back, Baz. We shouldn't look back. I mean, these guys had a good meeting with the football club.
Yeah.
Clearly, the football club issued a press release, which is from the football club's perspective. Yeah. And the SSG put their stuff out through Twitter. So if you went on Twitter, you didn't see it, right? But fundamentally, the club have embraced the idea of a fan advisory board.
That's good, yeah.
Which is hardly surprising because it's in the Tracy Crouch report, so it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, you wouldn't be surprised that the chief executive can't, on a Zoom call, say, "Oh yeah, I'll let a fan on the board, no problem."
Of course, yeah.
So Denise, who was very enthusiastic, by the way, and very receptive, and used words like supportive and excited even, and all those sorts of things. She's gone off to speak to the board of Everton Football Club, and presumably the largest shareholder as well, and to find out what the official reply is going to be to these 2 recommendations. I think it's an absolute no-brainer that the fan advisory board will come back as a yes, and let's wait and see about a fan on the board, what that means.
Yeah.
So the challenge now for the SSG is not to sit, rest on their laurels. It's to start the process of defining what the FAB looks like, defining what the timetable is, to have open and transparent elections, and be ready to have a fan on the board before the start of next season. Because the SSG doesn't have to wait for the club's approval; they can get on with it now. They can get on with it, and elect, and we, the fan base, can elect those 11 people and say we're ready. We're ready. We've done our bit.
Yeah.
And clearly, I think the club will certainly recognise the fan advisory board as being a legitimate entity.
Yeah.
And the trick now is to have the biggest election in footballing history to get the right 11 people.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's going to be very interesting.
Totally. Yeah.
I think. I mean, again, key that they're on the board by next season. I think it's just looking at it from a fan perspective, like I am. I think anything that I feel helps the board understand my feelings and how I feel about my football club, so that can be relayed. I'm not talking single here, the one single person, but what I mean is we all know right now the club's struggling. We know the team is struggling. We know the fan base is really struggling with what's going on. But do we have full confidence that the board understand exactly how we're feeling? I'm not asking you to answer that question right now, but what I mean is anything like this moving forward, if this shadow board or if this fan director was on the board, then that could be relayed in a meeting and say, do you understand how the fan base is actually feeling about this subject or that subject. Even if they sit around the table and go, oh, we understand it, we know what's what. There's going to be a conversation about that, isn't there? And I imagine that will be able to be fed back, because there's got to be some transparency here as well. Board meetings cannot always be, windows shut, doors locked, and we discuss and nothing gets out of these four walls. I accept some points on an agenda might be like that, because the football club doesn't have to share everything with everybody. But if you've got, just say it was now, so this is how I'm feeling, and I know you always take a slightly different view, or your view, might be a little bit different to mine, but right now I'm feeling frustrated that the club has continued to recruit poorly. I feel really frustrated that we recruited a manager that a lot of the fan base didn't really want. I'm frustrated that the director of football's gone, but we haven't been given really any other information other than there'll be a structural review of what goes on, whatever that means. And so just right now, I'm frustrated that we haven't had any money to spend, and we might not have any money in January. Just I'm taking this broadly, of course. So if this was right now and this shadow board was in place, and say it was you, John, who were the fan director, and people would go, I know it, I'm just saying, say it was you in this example, and you said, well, I'm at a board meeting on Monday and I will be relaying all of these fears that the fans have got, or worries or concerns, to the board, so they will know at least in that meeting that the fan base is being heard. And then you feed that back. The board say, right, we've taken that on board. We are aware. Thank you, John, for feeding back. And you come back and go, I've fed it all to them. They're all aware of how frustrated we are, how worried we are, how concerned by a lack of communication, so on, so on, so on. Then at least we go, well, it's not like they don't know. And listen, they probably do know, of course. They're not stupid. But just having that one person on that board and this fan advisory board to feed that to him, to get stuff prepared to go into that meeting, surely that would help us as a fan base to go, well, we can have our voices heard, because it's nothing worse than feeling totally, like I do at the moment. I feel like right now, not like we're just, doesn't matter what we say, things are happening and will happen regardless of how we feel. That's just how I feel right now. That might not necessarily be the case. It just seems that way at the moment. But so it'd be good I think it'd be good to have someone who can feed those frustrations to the board.
Yeah, I agreed with everything you were saying then, because we're all Evertonians at the end of the day, and therefore I share the frustrations. I've probably got some of my own, Of
course, yeah.
And of course, what goes on in parallel with these sort of debates, with this ESSG thing, is the fans forum still exists. They meet with the football club, right? Yeah. So fans can pile in with the fans forum and say, express our views, okay? Yeah. And the Shareholders Association still exists. And shareholders who are members of the association, or want to be, or wider, or whatever, they can pile in on the Shareholders Association and say, please ask these questions, right? Yeah. Now, the association met with the football club, and again, senior execs, because Denise had to cancel because she had to go to a Premier League meeting, I think. But we still got Grant Ingles coming to the meeting, who's a board member, alongside, senior execs like Richard Kenyon. And we covered the questions that the association felt needed to be asked. We also covered the questions that some of our members asked as well, And because the meeting can't last forever, as you know, there's going to be countless questions from Evertonians, we secured a commitment that they would answer the questions that we'd asked, and the ones that we couldn't ask because we ran out of time, they would tell us the structure of the organisation so that we would know who to ask the questions of. Okay, right, so the association's made progress in not having to do everything through Denise or everything through Richard Kenyon or whatever. And if that gets embraced as one-to-one direct relationships, then that's cool. And that actually, in an indirect way, will present the foundation for how the fan advisory board should meet, should be engaged with. Because and this is all personal views about how things should be done, rather than, because the Shareholders Association is part of this ESSG thing, but it's not me. It's one of my colleagues on the exec committee, right?
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And so the simple thing would be, we can imagine, hopefully, say this time of the season, next season, right?
Yeah.
So we're at Christmas, the fan advisory board is up and running, and one of its members regularly attends Everton board meetings.
Yeah.
So you can imagine our shadow board having a meeting a week before the real board meeting at the football club, and saying, what are we going to take to the agenda? What do we want to talk about? What do we want asked? What do we want answered? And so on. Okay. And therefore, the 11 members of the fan advisory board would be making sure that the views of their constituents are expressed through the board member who goes off to the meeting the week after. And so that's why it's key that people know, not just that you've got 11 representatives, but which one represents me.
Yeah.
You know, and that therefore is why it's going to be quite challenging and probably very interesting for the SSG to morph from being what it is to being a fully elected fan advisory board. You know, and you know, you've got to try and it's all in the papers, isn't it? You've got to try and balance representation so you cover all the segments of the fan base. You know, definitely. Because I can't personally see, I mean, I could be an advocate of it, but I could also argue the other way, that you could just say, well, anyone who wants to be on the fan advisory board, put your name here and we'll have a big vote, and the 11 with the most votes, you're in, you know? But if you do that and they're all blokes who are 75 years of age who never go to the game, what purpose does that serve? You know,
of course,
and if it doesn't cover minority groups, whether it's disabled or, you know, or gender-based or age-based or whatever. So I think trying to keep all the people happy all of the time is going to be really difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think inevitably, when the fan advisory board elections come around, there has to be the potential for somebody who's not affiliated to anything to run a really good campaign and get themselves elected. Otherwise, it's not what we want it to be, is it?
No, that's
you know?
Yeah.
You know, and then what you do is the fan base has to trust in those 11 people because we've just voted for them.
Yeah.
But we could quickly make analogies around how general elections are run and realize that you don't always get what you want because the first past the post approach results in what it is, you know, the first past the post. So there's always going to be an element of those who campaign best, are the ones who are going to get positions, you know, and they may be the ones with the biggest reach on social media or whatever it was. But one thing is clear, the club won't be picking them.
No, and that's important.
That's the most important thing. Yeah. The club will not be picking these 11 people.
Because what would be really, we'll wrap it up now because obviously we've covered loads, but I think what would be really good, and I don't know how you'd do it, would be similar to what we discussed on our patron show about the shadow board, is that you'd have areas of expertise, so that, because you don't, I personally looking at it, I don't just want 11 fans with the best reach socially, because while their views might be really relevant, and they might be, I would like areas of expertise. We discussed on the show, as many of our viewers will have seen, a shadow board that had a finance fella on, a shadow board that was a shadow director of football, so someone who was working in the football industry who understood recruitment, you know, maybe a marketing fella who understood, you know, how Everton should be getting marketed. Because what we want is, we want these people who are elected to be able to challenge our own physical board, the actual official Everton board, and say, why aren't you doing this? Now, if it was me and I went to Grant Ingles and said, all right, Grant, why aren't Everton making X amount of money on sponsorships or whatever, right? I don't know how you go about doing that. So I could just be stamping my feet and he could be looking at me going, well, because this is the market you know, this is the market value of our deals, whatever. But if it was someone who dealt in business, again, I'll doff my hat to you from someone who's been in business for many, many years. You understand lots of nuances. You understand how to drive things. You understand workforces and everything else. But if Grant Ingles tried to pull the wool, not pull the wool, but if he tried to offer you a substandard answer, you're more likely to say, no, because that isn't how it works, because I'm working in it, and this is how it works. Where I might go, oh, is that right? Oh, okay then. So Everton can only get £2 million for a shirt sponsor, because that's the going rate. Where you might go, hang on, I'm working in that field, and I know that X, Y, and Z are getting 10 million for it, and things like that. So people who can actually offer not only a point of view as a fan to say, we should be doing better, but actually got expertise in that field. So when they're challenging it from a base of knowledge rather than just stamping my feet going, why can't we sign a right back who's amazing and sets up 15 goals a season for 300 grand? Well, because you can't, because they're not in the field, you know?
Yeah, and I think what you just said actually, Baz, and I thought that was a fab summary, to be honest, because what you've just said presents the opportunity if the fans can get behind this for an exciting future. Because let's compare and contrast, right? Right now, there are 3 people, forget who the people are,
Yeah.
whether you like them or not.
Yeah,
There's 3 people on the board of Everton Football Club. There is no doubt in my mind that the club or Farhad Bashiri or both are definitely going to do this, not just likely, they're definitely going to do this, hence why I say, I've no doubt. Appoint 2 more board members, right? One of those undoubtedly will have a commercial background because it's seriously lacking at that level, okay? And the other one will have a footballing person's view of football, not just fan-based and stuff. And I'm not convinced that they'll necessarily appoint another director of football, but they'll have a board member who's accountable for the footballing side.
Right, yeah.
When they've done that, if we call it a when rather than an if, there'll be 5 people on the board of Everton Football Club. There'll be 11 on the fan advisory board.
Yeah.
And it's in the document that the function of, and you called it in a way, the function of this fan advisory board is to be a consultative body.
Yeah.
Now, the way the club interpret that is, we will come to the FAB and say, what do you think of this? Right? And the FAB will go into a huddle, speak to the fan base, and go back with an answer.
Yeah.
That's the tame version. That's a supercharged fans forum.
Yeah.
What the fans want is one where it goes the other way round.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the fan advisory boards say, we think you, the club, should be doing this.
Yeah.
And here's our proposal, here's our proposition, here's our opinion, which is founded on the fact that we've got some experts.
Yeah.
And it's what our fans want. So, in other words, instead of the club just pulling insight in, the FAB will push insight in as well. And that's why in the exec summary and in the body of the document, it talks about, and you read it out before, suitably qualified and experienced people, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, to achieve that, you have to have some criteria for being eligible for an election, don't you?
Of course, yeah. Definitely.
Okay. And I don't know whether it's perceived to be provocative or not, but I'll say it. I don't think it should be. But the idea that you would have 11 people on a fan advisory board and none of them are disabled, but they're supposed to represent the disabled elements of our fan base, in my mind, is completely ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to have some reserve positions to say, well, actually, we've got one position reserved for a representative of the disabled fans, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
You might argue there's a position reserved for, I don't know, international fans or something. But you can't get carried away and end up with all 11 of them being reserved.
No, of course you can't.
And you also can't require everyone who wants to be a candidate for election to fit into one of these segments. Okay? So I think my own personal view is if we call them reserved positions, like the disabled one being an example, then they should be in the minority across the 11. But they still have to go through the same robust election process as everybody else.
Yeah, definitely.
And go back to what you said about you don't necessarily want the one with the greatest reach on social media, something. I think you still have to allow for the fact that there should be candidacy, which is just that. There are no criteria other than you can prove you're an Everton fan. Because we don't want red shites ended up on our fan advisory board, do we? Right?
No, of course.
So, and if there is a fan out there who's not affiliated to anything but wants to be on the fan advisory board, and he can prove it, or he or she can prove they're Evertonians, they should be able to go into the election. And if they're just dead good at getting hundreds of thousands of people on social media to vote for them, more power to their elbow. Yeah. Because despite what you said, if that person's on the fab, they can tell all their followers on social media what's going on.
Yeah, I just meant we don't want a situation where there's 11 of them. So the top 11.
Totally agree.
I mean? I'm not saying there might be someone who's great, who's got X amount of thousand, and it's like, that's a good way to hit that demographic. But I just wouldn't want it where it was like the 11 most, not most popular, but the 11 of them, you know.
Well, to a degree, that's what it is, most popular, isn't it?
Yeah, but I want the expertise involved. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's where we go back to what you and I talked about whenever it was 2-3 weeks ago, about a shadow board. And the basis of the conversation you drove, which, you interrogated me basically, right, was about us matching up with the boards. Yeah. That's for real. So we would have somebody who's a chair type person, someone who's a chief exec, someone who's a finance person, and if I'm right, someone who's a commercial person, and somebody who's a footballing person. Yeah. And that's only 5 of the places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And our fab's going to have twice as many as that, right? So the ambition has to be that the fab is more experienced and more knowledgeable than the Everton board is.
Yeah. Well,
how cool would that be?
That's very
How cool would that be?
Oh, well, that's good. And that, you said it before, that makes it more exciting that we can drive our football club, pull our football club, drag our football club kicking and screaming into where we hope it would go. Ideally, they'd bounce off each other and we'd move forward, because that's what we want.
And that's the right way, that it's interaction, it's engagement, it's they're prepared to listen, we're prepared to stand by what they say, because ultimately and probably legally, Farhad Moshiri operates as a shadow director anyway, because what he says goes, and he presumably on occasions is quite prescriptive. We certainly seem to think he's prescriptive when it's about appointing and sacking managers, and we should never forget that it doesn't matter how powerful, in quotes, the fan advisory board is. We will only have one vote at board level. Yeah,
of course. But at least we'd have our views here. That's the point.
And let's pretend that means the board's 6 strong, for example. There's 5 anyway, and then there's the fan. If Farhad wants the 5 to vote for Toffee,
Oh yeah.
Our man's not going to get tea, is he?
No, of course,
or she, of course,
Yeah.
But it will be there, and I think the challenges that will be thrown up, not just by Everton, but I think that the Premier League clubs in the round, because they don't necessarily want independent regulation.
No.
They won't necessarily want fans on the board, although Denise, bless her, I think it sounds genuine when she talks about wanting to get ahead of the curve and Everton doing these things properly. And the challenge that she faces is trying to achieve that without being too prescriptive, because the club are very into controlling and trying to get it designed in their own image. And I think it will take a little bit of time and probably behaviours on the side of the SSG to make the football club understand that when the fans talk about independence, they actually mean the football club isn't involved at all.
Yeah.
That's the only safe way to do this, right? Is to say the whole process of defining, selecting, maybe if you do it, a bit like you would for an MP, where the local community decide who's their candidate, and then it goes into a big vote. But the whole process has to be totally and utterly independent of the football club, directly independent, because clearly, if you want to email everyone with a client ID, the club might have to send the email.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But that's all they will do, send the email.
Yeah.
The SSG will have its own website. It won't be waiting on whether Everton like what's going on their website or not, and so on. And I think all of that is good for the club as well, because sometimes the club has to consider its own position, and therefore it can be seen to be frustrating the process. And certainly listening to Denise, she doesn't want to frustrate the process. Maybe people lower down the organisation do, but she doesn't. And therefore, let's make it easy by maintaining the integrity of the fan organisation, whatever it's called, that it is first and foremost independent.
Yeah.
That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. A good place to finish, because that's exactly what it should be. So let's leave it there. It's really good. Well, obviously, it's going to be very interesting seeing how this all plays out now, and seeing the processes going into it. I'm sure we'll be having more chats as it goes along, John. Certainly on our Business with Blaine session that we have monthly, so it'll be interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time out, John. Go and enjoy the rest of your pale ale. And
it's nearly gone now.
Well, it should be, yeah. So finish it off. Right. Big thanks to John there. Let us know what you think in the comments section below about the ESSG. Do you think it's a good thing for the football club? Can we finally start to make our voices heard more? And how can this work going forward? Is it a positive, or do you think it's a bit of a patsy, bit of a little pat on the head and go, yeah, we've done what you asked us to? Let us know. Let's hope it is definitely not that. Like I say, big thanks to John for joining us. We'll see you later.